So I want you to picture a boardroom, a high-stakes meeting.
Oh, we all know the one.
Right. You have probably been in a dozen of these this year alone. Now, just look around that imaginary table. The person talking the most, the one who is just eagerly filling every single silence with data points and suggestions and caveats.
Just constantly jumping in.
Exactly. Yeah. That is almost always the person with the least power in the room.
Yeah, it really is.
Meanwhile, the true decision maker, like the person wielding actual influence, is just sitting back. They might speak once.
Maybe twice if you're lucky.
Right. And when they do, the entire room just holds its breath. So today, we are dissecting exactly why that happens.
And it is a phenomenal dynamic to observe once you actually know what to look for. Yeah. Because it completely upends how most of us are taught to communicate. I mean, we are taught to show our work, right?
We're constantly raise your hand, participate,
Yeah, exactly. We are taught to participate. But what you were describing there, that boardroom scenario, it is the threshold between simply speaking a language and actively wielding it as an instrument of influence.
And that is exactly what this deep dive is all about today. Welcome in, everyone.
Happy to be here.
If you are listening to this right now, you are part of the inner circle today. Because whether you are prepping for a crucial negotiation or maybe looking to change how you are perceived at work.
Or even just insanely curious about human behavior.
Yeah, exactly. Today's session is going to fundamentally shift your perspective. We are basically opening a door to the implicit rules of communication.
Just to give this some context, in language learning, there is this globally recognized framework for proficiency.
Right, the A1 to C2 thing?
Yeah, exactly. It starts at A1, which is like a total beginner, and it goes all the way up to C2. And C2 is the absolute summit.
Like total mastery.
Total effortless mastery. Native level fluency, where you don't even have to think about the grammar. What we are doing today is taking that concept of C2 level mastery and applying it directly to power dynamics.
Okay, I love that framing.
Yeah, we are talking about C2 level power communication. These are the invisible architectures operating in every single human interaction.
From like your local coffee shop all the way up to the highest levels of global diplomacy.
Absolutely everywhere.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today for this deep dive is to deconstruct those unwritten codes. We want to understand what separates the people who are instantly heard from those who are politely ignored.
Which is a very painful place to be.
It really is. So to do that, we are going to explore 3 massive pillars today. We will start with the economics of language.
A great starting point.
Yeah. Then we will look at the geometry of status. And finally, we will examine something called the weaponization of silence.
I mean, when you combine those 3 elements, it just fundamentally changes your entire social footprint.
It really does. You move from being someone who just, participates in an environment to someone who actually shapes it.
Yes. You dictate the reality of the room.
So let's jump right into that first pillar, the economics of language. When we think about these unwritten codes, the most counterintuitive rule to me is about the actual physical volume of speech.
Right. And just to be clear, we don't mean volume like how loud you project your voice.
Oh, right. Yeah. Not screaming. We mean the sheer quantity of words you choose to let out of your mouth.
Exactly. The foundational rule here relies on the principle of linguistic scarcity.
Linguistic scarcity.
Yes. The mechanism is fairly straightforward on paper. Powerful people just speak less. But the psychology behind it is what makes it so fascinating.
Let's get into that psychology because it's so common.
Well, if you analyze, say, a mid-level manager in a high-pressure meeting, their natural impulse is completely driven by a need for validation.
Right. They want to prove they deserve a seat at that table.
Precisely. And that the anxiety of holding that seat, it translates into this relentless output of words.
Like they just can't stop talking.
They can't. They want to show they have done the reading. They have run all the numbers. They have considered every single angle.
So they basically attempt to fill every single lull in the conversation.
Yeah. They are essentially throwing information at the wall, just hoping the sheer volume of data will construct this sort of shield of competence around them.
Wow. It's a defense mechanism, basically.
It absolutely is.
They think their professional worth is somehow measured by their word count. I was actually thinking about this when I was prepping for today, and it is literally economics.
It really is.
Like, think about a central bank.
Okay. Yeah.
If a central bank suddenly panics, and just starts printing endless amounts of money.
Just flooding the market with cash.
Right, flooding the market. What actually happens, the currency loses its value. You get hyperinflation. A dollar bill suddenly means absolutely nothing.
Yeah, you need a wheelbarrow of cash to buy bread.
Exactly. So if you flood a room with words, your words suffer from that exact same inflation. Every additional unnecessary sentence you add just dilutes the value of the sentence that came right before it.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. I mean, when you speak constantly, your voice shifts from being a signal to just being background noise.
You just become the hum of the air conditioner.
Exactly. People just tune you out because your words are cheap. They're abundant. But the C2 level communicator, they practice something called verbal parsimony.
Verbal parsimony. Okay, break that down for us. What does that mean?
Well, parsimony basically means an extreme unwillingness to spend money or use resources. You are stingy.
Okay.
So in this context, it means severely restricting the supply of your words. You treat your voice as a highly valuable, incredibly scarce resource.
So if you only speak when it is absolutely necessary,
then the scarcity of your contribution dictates that your words carry immense weight. You are creating a synthetic high demand for your thoughts simply by limiting the supply.
I mean, it makes complete sense in theory, right? But let's be real here. When I am nervous or when I'm put on the spot in a meeting, my biological instinct is to just start rambling.
Oh, everybody does it. It's human nature.
It is a very hard habit to break. So how do we actually practically enforce this verbal parsimony on ourselves?
There is a very specific structural technique that forces you into parsimony, and it is known as the rule of three, or a tricolon.
The tricolon. That sounds like a dinosaur.
It does a bit. But it is actually one of the oldest and most devastatingly effective rhetorical devices ever engineered.
Really? Just the rule of three?
Yes. The rule is incredibly simple. When you make a point, you structure it in three parallel definitive parts. No more, no less.
Okay, I have to ask about the underlying logic here. Why three? Like, why wouldn't a really punchy two-part statement work just as well? Or, a really comprehensive four-part list?
It comes down to cognitive psychology, actually, and how the human brain processes patterns.
Yeah.
Think about it. One data point is just an anomaly. Two data points, that's a coincidence. Or maybe a contrast, like a dichotomy.
Right. It's this versus that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that often feels unresolved to the brain, like you are waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah, it's like a setup without a punchline.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But three creates a pattern. The human brain is essentially this massive, incredibly efficient pattern recognition machine.
So it likes threes?
It loves threes. When it hears a sequence of three, it perceives a sense of completion. It feels rhythmic and just inherently definitive.
And what happens if you go to four?
4 crosses the threshold into a list.
Yeah.
And the moment the brain realizes it is listening to a list, it starts to check out.
Oh, the cognitive load gets too heavy.
Exactly. You lose them. So 3 hits the absolute sweet spot of human working memory. It signals to the listener that your thought is structured, contained, and finalized.
I want to illustrate this for you listening because the difference is wild when you actually hear it play out in a real-world scenario. Let's do a quick role play.
Let's do it.
Okay. I am going to give you the typical nervous, non-parsimonious pitch. The rambling approach we all fall into. Let's say I'm pitching a new marketing strategy to you and you are the CEO.
All right, I'm the CEO. I'm listening.
Okay, here we go. I might say something like, so I really think we should execute this strategy because, it's a really good idea overall, and the data we looked at from last quarter supports it, plus our main competitors aren't really doing anything like it yet, so it will probably increase our market share eventually. And also I checked with the finance team, and we do have some budget for it.
Okay, stop right there. If I am the CEO sitting across from you, my immediate physiological reaction to that is just pure exhaustion.
Oh, man. Yeah, it felt exhausting just to say it.
You gave me a lot of disparate data points, sure, but you have given me absolutely zero confidence.
Not at all.
The mechanism at play here is that you sound like you are discovering your own argument at the exact same time I am.
Like I'm just making it up on the spot.
Right. You are hoping one of those 5 reasons sticks, which tells me you aren't fully convinced by any of them.
I'm just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks.
Exactly.
Okay, now let's flip it. Give me the C2 tricolon version of that exact same pitch.
All right. First, I would eliminate all the filler words. No so, no really, no,
Fuck the fat.
Yes. I would sit back, look you directly in the eye, and say, this strategy is sound, decisive, and unrivaled. It is based on 3 key pillars: market opportunity, technological advantage, and financial viability.
Wow. Okay, that is incredibly potent. The contrast is literally night and day.
Let's look at why that works, though.
Please, because my rambling version just felt like this nervous flood of insecurity. Yours felt like an absolute declaration. It felt like you had already won the argument before I even had a chance to evaluate the data.
Well, the tricolon imposes structural order on a chaotic environment. It basically tells the listener, I have thought about this deeply before I even opened my mouth.
You've done the homework.
Exactly. I have already done the hard work of categorizing all the complexities of this issue into 3 distinct, digestible pillars, and I am just delivering the finished product to you now.
It projects just supreme competence.
And crucially, it enforces that verbal parsimony by default. You simply cannot ramble when your structure is that tight. You are forced to edit yourself.
You are basically building a fence around your own words so they can't escape.
That's a great way to look at it.
Okay, that's the rule of 3. But there's a second technique under this economics of language pillar, and it is all about swapping out hedging questions for declarative statements.
Now, this is a trap that ensnares some of the most intelligent, capable people in the corporate world.
Oh, I see it all the time.
Less powerful communication constantly relies on softening opinions into questions.
Yeah, we do this constantly to avoid conflicts. Like, it is a socialization issue, right?
Yeah, very much so.
We want to be polite, we want to seem collaborative, and we just don't want to step on anyone's toes. So instead of just stating our analysis, we hedge.
Give me an example.
We say things like, don't you think maybe we should consider a different approach? Or, I was just wondering if this is the best way forward for the team.
Right, and the intent behind those hedges is usually good. It is a desire for tribal harmony.
We want everyone to get along.
Exactly. But the implicit signal you are transmitting when you do that is profound insecurity.
Really? Just from a polite question?
Yes. Let's examine the actual mechanism of a hedge. When you phrase your professional opinion as a tentative question, you are essentially asking the rest of the room for permission to hold that opinion.
Oh, wow.
You are handing the authority over your own thoughts to whoever happens to be listening.
But wait, if we strip away all our polite hedges, aren't we just going to sound like bulldozers? Like, we don't want to just dictate to people?
That is the fear, certainly. But it is a fundamental misunderstanding of what a declarative statement actually does.
Okay, explain that.
This isn't about being aggressive or shouting people down. It is about quiet conviction. A C2 level communicator takes that weak hedge and structurally transforms it.
How so?
Instead of the questioning hedge like, don't you think maybe we should consider a different approach? You calmly state, a different approach is required.
Ooh, just like that.
Yes. Instead of, I was wondering if this is the best way forward, you simply state, the optimal way forward is this.
A different approach is required. It's so clean. There is literally nowhere for the listener to hide in that sentence.
It is clean because it establishes your analysis as a concrete reality to be dealt with, rather than just a fleeting suggestion to be swatted away.
That makes total sense.
When you ask a question, you invite debate on whether your opinion is even valid. But when you make a declarative statement, you present a reality, and you invite the room to operate within that new reality.
You are not asking for permission to have an opinion. You are stating your analysis as a fact of the universe.
Precisely.
All right, for you listening right now, here is your actionable takeaway for this first pillar. We want you to go on a strict word diet for the next 7 days.
A word diet is the perfect entry point for this.
So in every single meeting you have this week, challenge yourself to say 50% less than you normally would. Literally, have your output.
Restrict your supply.
Yes. And when you do decide to spend your valuable words, make them count. Catch yourself before you ramble and build a tricolon. Find 3 strong words.
And catch yourself before you ask a hedging question.
Exactly. Replace it with a calm, flat, declarative statement, and then just observe the room. Notice how people's physical posture actually changes. Notice how they lean in when you speak. You are literally hacking the economics of language.
If you commit to that for just 1 week, the way your colleagues perceive your authority will fundamentally shift, I guarantee it.
Okay, so we have optimized the supply of our words. We know how to package them tightly and deliver them with absolute conviction.
We have the tools.
But what happens when you deploy those perfectly optimized words into an environment that is already rigged against you?
Now that is the real challenge.
That brings us to part 2, the geometry of status, and specifically the vital concept of controlling the conversational frame.
All right, so we are moving from the words themselves to the invisible battleground where the words are spoken.
Yes.
This is arguably the most profound concept in human communication. Every single interaction you have, Whether it is a casual chat at a coffee shop or a multi-million-dollar corporate merger, it all operates within an invisible frame.
Let's define frame really clearly for the listener because it can sound a bit abstract.
Sure. Think of a frame as a literal picture frame or maybe a camera lens. It is the underlying context, the set of assumptions or the specific perspective that defines what the conversation is actually about.
Okay, so like the boundaries of the discussion.
Exactly. If you are looking at a vast, complex painting through a tiny 1-inch frame, you only see what the frame allows you to see.
You miss the big picture.
Right. In conversation, the golden rule of power dynamics is the person who controls the frame controls the entire interaction.
It is basically like deciding what game we are playing before anyone even rolls the dice.
That is a perfect analogy. Are we playing a game focused on cost? Are we playing a game focused on premium quality? Is the frame about assigning blame? Or is it about collaborative problem solving?
And most people don't even realize the game is happening, do they?
They don't. Less powerful communicators constantly, almost unconsciously, step inside the other person's frame. They surrender the battleground without even realizing a war is taking place.
Let's run a scenario to see how this plays out in real time. Imagine I am a highly aggressive client.
Okay.
I call you into my office, I slide a proposal across the desk, and I say, your price is outrageously high. We can't work with this.
Let's look at the mechanics of that statement. Your frame, as the client, is clearly established. The price is the primary problem.
Yes, that's my reality.
If I operate as a low-status communicator, the natural anxiety-driven response is to immediately accept your frame and try to survive within it.
So how would that sound?
I would likely get defensive. I might say, well, I understand it seems high, but we can offer a 10% discount. And you have to understand the materials cost so much more this year, and our team puts in so many extra hours.
And right there, I have got you trapped. As the aggressive client, I am totally winning the interaction.
Completely.
Because you are now frantically defending yourself within my reality. You are trying to justify your very existence based on the assumption that the price is the only thing that matters.
I have validated your frame simply by arguing within it. I am on the defensive, trying to dig myself out of a hole that you dug for me.
It's a losing battle.
It is. Now let's look at the C2 level response. A master communicator recognizes the trap instantly. They do not defend themselves within an opponent's frame.
What do they do instead?
They use the art of reframing, they ignore the bait, and they seamlessly impose a completely different reality on the conversation.
Okay, let's reset the board then. I am the angry client again.
Get me.
Your price is outrageously high. We can't work with this.
I wouldn't flinch. I would maintain eye contact and calmly say, it sounds like upfront cost is a key consideration for you, which is entirely understandable. But most of our premium clients find that the real discussion isn't about the initial cost, but about the long-term return on investment and the catastrophic risk of project failure. Let's talk about the risk of this initiative failing. What would that look like for your department?
Oh man, that is incredibly smooth. I can actually feel the shift in power just listening to it.
It completely changes the dynamic.
Let's dissect the psychological judo you just performed there step by step, because there was a lot packed into that.
It is a very deliberate 3-step sequence. Step 1 is a brief, non-defensive acknowledgement.
Okay.
I said, it sounds like upfront cost is a key consideration for you, which is entirely understandable. Notice what I did not do.
You didn't agree that the price was high.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I did not validate your premise.
Yeah.
I simply acknowledged that you care about the price. This builds a momentary bridge of rapport. It basically tells your nervous system that I am listening, which prevents you from escalating your aggression.
You didn't fight me on my reality, which would just cause a screaming match, but you didn't accept it either. You just sort of observed it.
Perfectly stated. Step 2 is the pivot. But most of our premium clients find this is the structural hinge of the response. I am grabbing you by the collar and pulling you out of your tiny frame.
And step 3 is establishing the brand new frame. You said, the real discussion isn't about the initial cost, but about the long-term return on investment and the catastrophic risk of project failure. You just totally changed the game we were playing.
I altered the entire geometry of the conversation. We are no longer debating whether my service is too expensive. We are now discussing the terrifying prospect of your department failing.
And implicitly, how your premium service is the only thing that will save me.
Exactly. I took complete control of the lens.
I want to throw an analogy at this to make sure we are locking this concept in for you listening. Imagine I am a chess grandmaster.
Okay, I like this.
I've spent my entire life studying strategy. Now, someone walks up to me in a park, and challenges me to an arm wrestling match.
Right.
If I roll up my sleeve and try to arm wrestle them, that is a catastrophic failure of strategy. I am playing their game in their arena where they clearly have the biological advantage.
And you are going to lose badly.
The C2 level response, the reframe, is looking at them calmly and saying, physical strength is impressive, but premium strategists settle disputes on the board. Sit down. Let's play chess.
That's brilliant.
You are dragging them kicking and screaming into your arena. You are forcing them to play by your rules.
That is a perfect visualization of frame control. And, you picked up on a very subtle status elevation that happened in the role play, which ties directly into your grandmaster analogy.
Oh, what was that?
During the pivot, I casually inserted the phrase, most of our premium clients.
Yes, that stood out to me. It felt very intentional.
It is highly calculated. By casually aligning myself with premium clients, I am implicitly elevating my own status in the room.
Okay.
And simultaneously, I am subtly challenging you to elevate yours. The unspoken subtext is basically, if you want to argue about pennies, you are a low-tier client. If you want to discuss high-level ROI and catastrophic risk mitigation, then you're a premium client who belongs in this conversation.
Wow. It completely reshapes the power dynamic without ever issuing a direct insult.
Exactly. It leverages their own ego to put them into your frame.
Incredible. Now, let's push this even further because there is a second technique under this geometry of status, and it is known as the political maneuver.
Yes, the political maneuver.
It is basically the art of answering the unasked question.
Or, to put it more bluntly, it is the art of answering the question you wish you had been asked, rather than the hostile one you actually received.
We see politicians do this constantly, right? Like on Sunday morning talk shows.
All the time.
Sometimes they do it clumsily and it looks super evasive, but when a master does it, it is virtually undetectable and incredibly powerful.
Let's look at a high-pressure corporate scenario for this one.
Okay, lay it on me.
You were in a final round interview for a massive executive role, and the interviewer just throws a live grenade at you. They ask, your last major project was a total failure, wasn't it?
That's a rough one.
Let's trace the weak response first. The interviewer's frame is established strictly around the concept of failure.
Right.
If you accept the premise of the question, you are doomed. If you say, well, it didn't meet all its initial targets, or there were macroeconomic factors outside of my control, you have already lost the interaction.
You are rolling around in the mud of their negative premise.
Exactly. You are arm wrestling.
You are trying to explain away a failure, which just reinforces the association between you and the word failure in their brain.
The C2 pivot here requires incredible discipline. You must completely ignore the trap. You do not even utter the word failure because repeating their negative word reinforces their frame.
So what do you say?
You absorb the question and you respond like this. What that specific project taught us was absolutely invaluable. It provided our team with critical data that directly engineered the breakthrough success of our current initiative. The key lesson we extracted was the vital importance of rapid iteration, which I have now made a cornerstone of my entire management strategy.
It's practically magic. You didn't actually answer their question at all.
I completely bypassed it. I answered a totally different question.
Right.
I answered the unasked question, what did you learn from your last project, and how has it made you a better leader? I hijacked the airtime they gave me, and I used it to deliver a prepackaged, highly positive narrative about lessons learned, breakthrough success, and management strategy.
The mechanism of why this works is just fascinating to me. By the time you finish your beautifully structured triclon about rapid iteration and strategy, the interviewer's working memory has literally been overwritten.
Yes. They have forgotten they even asked you about a failure.
You have literally moved the spotlight of their attention to a stage of your choosing.
You are dictating the cognitive geometry. You are deciding exactly where the boundaries of the conversation begin and end.
All right, you listening, here is your actionable takeaway for part 2. I want you to actively look for the matrix this week.
Start seeing the code.
Identify the underlying frame in your next important conversation. Ask yourself, what is the invisible game being played right now? Is this debate really about the Friday deadline, or is it secretly a frame about who holds the power to dictate schedules?
That's a great distinction.
Is the client's complaint really about cost, or is it a frame about their own lack of trust in the process?
Because once you can actually see the frame, You have the agency to decide whether you want to live inside it or build a new one.
So I want you to prepare a pivot phrase. Have it loaded in the chamber before you even walk into the room. Use something like, that's an interesting perspective on the timeline, but I think the more salient question we need to solve today is...
Or, while cost is one factor, the core issue threatening this project is...
Drag them to your chessboard. Take complete control of the frame.
It takes practice, obviously, but it is the most liberating communication skill you could ever acquire.
Okay, so we have optimized our words. We have mastered the frame we put those words into. But now we have to talk about the void.
The space between.
We have to talk about what happens when we stop talking entirely. Let's move into our final pillar, part 3, the weaponization of silence. We are leaving language behind and looking at the deliberate strategic absence of it.
This is where communication truly transcends logic and becomes a raw psychological art form.
That sounds intense.
It is.
Okay.
In C2 level communication, silence is never just empty space. It is never just a break in the broadcast. It is a dense physical presence. It is a highly calibrated tool. And as the terminology suggests, it is a formidable weapon.
Silence as a presence. That is a heavy concept. Why does silence carry so much weight? Like, why does a quiet room suddenly feel so intensely uncomfortable for human beings?
We really have to look at biology and sociology to understand that.
Yeah.
Psychologically, human beings are deeply evolutionarily uncomfortable with silence in social interaction.
Right.
In a tribal setting, like back in the day, a sudden cessation of communication often signaled a threat, right?
Like a predator is near.
Or a break in social cohesion, or a disruption of harmony. We are socialized from birth to view conversational silence as awkwardness, or as a glaring red flag that something is horribly wrong.
When the conversation dies, our heart rate actually spikes.
Cortisol just floods the system. When a conversation suddenly goes quiet, especially in a high-stakes negotiation or a tense confrontation, our immediate, desperate biological impulse is to rush in and fill that void with noise.
We just want to signal that everything is okay. We self-soothe by talking.
Exactly.
We just want to relieve the tension so we can feel safe again.
And that biological urge is exactly why it is a critical error in business environments. The person who can comfortably endure that tension, the person who can sit in the silence without their nervous system forcing them to fill it, holds absolute power.
Because nature and human conversation abhors a vacuum.
Yes. The weaker communicator will always rush to fill the vacuum, and in doing so, they will surrender leverage.
Let's get into the mechanics of this, because there are 2 very specific techniques we need to master here. Technique number 1 is the post-statement pause.
This technique pairs flawlessly with the declarative statements we discussed back in the first pillar.
Oh, okay.
The execution is remarkably simple. You make a strong, definitive statement, and then you stop completely. You let the silence hang in the air.
Let's visualize it.
Mm-hmm.
You are in a brutal contract negotiation. The other side is pushing hard. You lean in and say, our position is non-negotiable on this point.
And then absolute silence. You do not move. You do not break eye contact.
Okay, let's just hold that silence for just 3 seconds right now.
Okay.
Man, even doing it in a controlled environment like this, I felt the immediate urge to add an addendum.
Right. It's physical.
My instinct was to say, our position is non-negotiable, if that makes sense to your team. Or is that a framework you guys can work with?
That is the exact instinct you must suppress.
Yeah.
You felt the tension, and you wanted to apply a linguistic softener to take the sting out of your own declarative statement.
Yeah, to make it less awkward.
But doing so destroys your authority. When you utilize the post-statement pause, the silence acts as an acoustic and psychological amplifier.
An amplifier.
It makes your final words echo in the minds of everyone in the room. It gives the statement immense, undeniable weight.
And it forces the person across the table to make the next move. You've hit the tennis ball into their court and basically dropped your racket.
Exactly. You have verbally drawn a line in the sand. By remaining utterly silent, you are transferring the entirety of the conversational pressure onto their shoulders.
They have to deal with it.
They have to react to the reality you just built. And because their nervous system is likely screaming at them that the silence is uncomfortable, their rushed response will almost always reveal their true negotiating position far more clearly than if you had kept talking and given them an easy exit ramp.
That is intense. But the second technique takes that pressure and literally multiplies it. Let's look at the post-question pause.
If the post-statement pause is an amplifier, the post-question pause is a masterclass in applying psychological leverage.
Let's set the scene for this one. Someone on your team has made a catastrophic error. You call them in and you ask a highly probing question, something like, what was the exact thought process that led to that specific decision?
You ask the question. You maintain steady, unblinking eye contact. And you do not say a single syllable more.
Let's feel it.
Yay.
It is brutal. It feels so heavy. If someone did that to me, just stared at me with dead, unyielding silence, after asking a surgical question like that, I would start sweating through my shirt.
Let's examine the psychological unraveling that actually occurs in the other person's mind during those 5 seconds.
What's happening in their head?
Their brain goes into absolute overdrive. They perceive the silence as a sign that their initial surface-level answer is somehow insufficient.
Oh.
They are desperately trying to formulate an explanation that will satisfy you, relieve the pressure, and just break the unbearable quiet. The immense weight of that vacuum forces them to speak, and when they do, the floodgates open. They over-explain.
They just start spilling everything to fill the space.
They spill their insecurities. They reveal underlying motives, hidden constraints, or maybe interpersonal team conflicts they never intended to share.
That's wild.
In a negotiation setting, they will literally start negotiating against their own interests just to make you nod your head.
Just to get a reaction.
And the most terrifying part, you haven't done anything, you haven't raised your voice, you have merely sat quietly and looked at them. You are weaponizing their own biological discomfort with silence to your supreme strategic advantage.
I have to push back here. I really have to ask the question that I know people listening are chewing on right now.
Fair enough. Go ahead.
What does this all mean for our ethics as professionals, calling this the weaponization of silence? It sounds heavy. If we are engineering psychological discomfort to make people unravel and over-explain, aren't we crossing a line? Like, where is the boundary between being a sharp strategic communicator and just playing manipulative mind games to break people down?
It is a vital question. And honestly, it is the necessary counterweight to everything we've discussed today. To understand the ethics of this, we have to view these techniques through the lens of a linguistic martial art.
A martial art. Okay, I like that framing. Let's explore that.
Think about someone who studies a physical martial art, like jiu-jitsu.
Sure.
They spend years learning how to strike, how to apply joint locks, how to systematically dismantle an opponent's balance. Those are potent, objectively dangerous skills.
Very dangerous.
But the true mastery of a martial art is not found in walking into a bar and picking fights to bully people.
Right.
The mastery is in knowing you possess the absolute capacity for power and choosing to wield it with profound discipline and restraint.
So the morality isn't in the tool itself, it's in the intent behind the deployment of the tool.
Precisely. These tools, imposing a dominant frame, enforcing biological discomfort through silence, utilizing the sheer force of linguistic scarcity, they must be used ethically and with very clear purpose.
Can you give an example of the right way to use it?
You use the post-question pause to cut through corporate obfuscation and find the truth of why a massive project failed. You use frame control to advocate fiercely for a righteous position when a bully is trying to shut you down in a meeting.
Yeah.
You use these skills to demonstrate unshakable leadership in a moment of extreme organizational crisis. You do not use them to gaslight your peers, to abuse your subordinates, or to manipulate people for petty, ego-driven personal gain.
It is basically the difference between a surgeon wielding a scalpel to save a life and a vandal using that exact same scalpel to slash someone's tires.
Yes.
The physics of the blade are identical. The intent dictates the morality.
You are wielding the architecture of human power. You must respect the weight of it, or it will eventually corrupt your relationships entirely.
That is a phenomenal distinction to keep us grounded. All right, for our listeners, here is your final actionable takeaway for part 3. In your next negotiation, or even during a difficult disagreement where tensions are running high, I want you to intentionally deploy a deliberate pause.
Try that.
After you make your most critical point, or after you ask your most probing question, close your mouth and count to 5 in your head. 5 to 7 full seconds of absolute silence.
And fair warning, for a normal communicator, 5 seconds will feel like a geologic era.
It will feel incredibly long. It will feel physically uncomfortable. You might feel your own heart rate spike. You might feel an overwhelming urge to apologize or soften your words.
We don't do it.
Do not do it. I want you to sit in that discomfort, acknowledge it, and realize what it actually is. That physical sensation is the feeling of power shifting across the table and settling firmly in your lap. Endure the quiet. Let the silence do the heavy lifting for you.
Because once you learn to truly trust the silence, you will never rush to fill it again.
Man, we have covered incredible ground today. We started at the threshold of normal language, and we have walked deep into the unwritten codes of influence.
We really have. If I were to synthesize the entirety of this deep dive, I would frame it like this. We have moved from being appeasement ground on the board to understanding the overarching architecture of the entire game.
Yeah.
Once you begin to see these implicit rules operating in the wild, the way executives guard their linguistic scarcity, the subtle ways people attempt to control the frame of a meeting, the devastating way they wield silence, you can never unsee them.
You really can't.
The veil is completely lifted.
It is like suddenly seeing the underlying matrix code behind every mundane conversation at the office.
And that is the ultimate linguistic advantage. You are no longer just reacting to the surface-level definitions of the words people are saying. You are navigating the structural power dynamics that are actually driving those words.
It changes how you view every single interaction. Before we wrap up today's session, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought.
Let's hear it.
Something to just mull over on your commute or before your next big meeting. We have spent this whole time talking about how these C2 level tools work marvelously against normal, everyday communicators.
Right, they work against the anxious mid-level managers and the nervous speakers who just don't know the rules.
Yes, the dynamic is usually super asymmetrical. But think about this scenario. What happens when two absolute masters of C2 level communication finally clash?
Ooh.
Imagine it. You have two people in a boardroom. Both are fiercely guarding their linguistic scarcity, refusing to give up a single unnecessary word. Both are perfectly utilizing tricolons. Both are simultaneously attempting to impose their own frame on the conversation. And both are perfectly comfortable weaponizing silence, just sitting there staring at each other, waiting for the other's biology to break.
That is a fascinating, incredibly high-stakes scenario.
Right. Like, does the conversation just devolve into an eternal, deadlocked stare-down? Two grandmasters refusing to move a single piece, just waiting for the clock to run out.
That's one possibility.
Or does it elevate into something else entirely? Does it bypass all the posturing and become this hyper-efficient, egoless dialogue where both parties understand exactly what is happening, skip the corporate pleasantries, and get straight to the absolute, unvarnished core of the issue?
I'd like to think it's the latter.
Keep an eye out for those boardroom battles, because watching two masters play the game against each other is truly something to behold.
It is a clash of titans. And it is entirely fought in the heavy, quiet spaces between words.
Absolutely.
Thank you all for joining us today. Trusting us to guide you through these deeper, high-level concepts is something we value immensely. We really hope this knowledge provides you with an extraordinary return on your investment in your career, your negotiations, and your life.
You are officially part of the inner circle now. Go out there, observe the hidden game, practice the techniques, and until next time, speak with intent.
I want you to start by just picturing the most charismatic person you know.
Oh, that's a great place to start. Everyone has someone who immediately comes to mind.
Right. Take a second and actually bring their face to mind. Maybe it's a former executive who could just command the absolute attention of a chaotic boardroom just by walking into it.
Or maybe it's a public figure, someone you find totally compelling even when you fundamentally disagree with them.
Exactly. Or, honestly, simply a friend who instantly becomes the gravitational center of any dinner party.
Yeah, the person everyone naturally gravitates toward.
Yeah, but when you picture that person, what are you actually observing? Because the cultural default is to just assume that whatever that it factor is, that unspoken glowing magnetism, they were simply born with it.
Which is such a pervasive myth, isn't it?
It really is. The underlying assumption is always that they hit the genetic lottery for charm, and the rest of us are just trying to keep up.
Yeah, we treat charisma as this fixed trait. It's analogous to eye color or height.
Right, like you either have the spark or you don't.
Precisely. And the source material we are examining today actively dismantles that assumption, which I love. And it does so by analyzing charisma through a really highly technical behavioral lens.
Because when we view charisma as innate magic, we effectively excuse ourselves from the rigorous work of developing it, don't we?
We let ourselves off the hook. But the research frames this entirely differently. It categorizes charisma not as an aura, but as a C2 level communication skill set.
Okay, let's unpack this, because for those who might not be familiar with linguistic grading, C2 is a very specific designation, right?
It is. It comes from the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages.
Right. So in language learning, A1 is a beginner, B levels are intermediate, and C2 is the absolute highest level of mastery.
Exactly. But, C2 isn't just about having a massive vocabulary or knowing all the obscure grammar rules.
It's deeper than that.
Much deeper. A C2 speaker understands the subtext. They understand the cultural weight of a pause, the humor, the idioms, the unwritten rules of how words interact with human emotion.
And the sources apply this exact standard to human behavioral interaction, which is wild to think about.
It's fascinating. Charisma is simply a C2 level mastery of physical presence, narrative structure, and evolutionary group dynamics.
So it is the absolute upper echelon of fluency in human interaction.
Yes. And that fundamentally changes the objective of leadership.
It really does, because if it's a learnable skill, then the outcome we are looking for isn't just, basic management.
Right. The text draws a fascinating distinction early on between power and charisma. Power forces compliance, but charisma earns loyalty.
That distinction is it's the bedrock of everything we're about to discuss today.
It really is, because power relies on structural authority. People comply because you sign their paychecks, right?
Yeah, or because you hold a title that dictates their performance review.
Exactly. Compliance is transactional. Charisma, on the other hand, makes people actively want to align with your vision.
It bypasses the transaction entirely.
It does. It accesses genuine loyalty. It is the dividing line between being a manager that people tolerate out of necessity and a leader that people actually revere.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Our mission for this deep dive is to deconstruct what the source refers to as the charisma code.
And we are going to look at 3 very distinct, highly actionable frameworks.
Right. The physics of presence, the chemistry of storytelling, and the biology of a tribe.
By framing these behaviors through hard sciences, we really strip away the mysticism.
We are going to give you the mechanics to not just, influence a one-off decision in a meeting, but to fundamentally alter the way people respond to your presence on a daily basis.
Because the analytical map provided in the text is incredibly precise, we aren't guessing at what makes someone charming based on, vague self-help platitudes.
Right. No, just be yourself advice here.
Exactly. We are observing the measurable mechanics of how they operate in physical space, the neurochemical reactions triggered by how they structure their words, and how they tap into deep-seated evolutionary biology.
So let's start with that physical space. Because before we even analyze the architecture of what someone says, we have to evaluate the container they inhabit.
The physical container is everything.
Yeah, and the research points out that human beings are making these sweeping judgments about authority and trustworthiness before a single syllable is even uttered.
We are looking at the physics of charisma.
The time frame for those judgments is measured in milliseconds, isn't it?
Literally milliseconds. Our brains are hardwired by evolution to constantly scan our environment and assess the status and threat level of the people around us.
And that assessment is entirely based on physical presence.
Entirely. The most charismatic individuals demonstrate a mastery over their physical environment. They appear to manipulate the literal physics of the room, specifically space and time.
Which sounds like a superpower. And the first core technique the text highlights for dominating physical space is this concept of stillness.
Yes, stillness. It contrasts the physical behavior of low-status, anxious individuals with the physical behavior of high-status individuals.
So if you observe someone who feels they lack authority in a high-stakes environment, their body language almost always leaks that internal anxiety.
It does. They exhibit what the text calls a lack of physical economy.
Right, they fidget. They constantly shift their weight from foot to foot.
And when they listen, they engage in that rapid-fire, excessive nodding.
Oh, the bobblehead effect.
Yes, exactly. Which is actually a biological appeasement gesture. It's signaling, I agree with you, please don't view me as a threat.
That makes so much sense. And they restrict their hand gestures to these small, jittery movements close to their chest.
Yeah, it's a physical manifestation of instability, and the audience's mirror neurons instantly register that instability as a lack of confidence.
But I want to challenge that slightly, because if we follow the physics analogy, let's look at gravity.
Okay, let's hear it.
The object with the most mass, or, the most grounded stillness, pulls the surrounding objects into its orbit. The room revolves around the center of gravity.
Right.
But does this mean the goal is to become entirely rigid? Like, if I just sit at a conference table totally frozen, refusing to nod, locking my body down, isn't that just going to make people deeply uncomfortable.
Oh, absolutely.
It feels like rigidity would be interpreted as hostility, not charisma.
That is a really critical distinction, and confusing stillness with rigidity is a very common misapplication of the data here.
So how are they different?
Well, rigidity is actually just another manifestation of anxiety. It is the freeze response in the fight or flight mechanism.
Oh, wow. So it's still anxiety, just a different flavor of it.
Exactly. It signals massive internal tension. The framework we are looking at emphasizes an economy of motion. It is about making every physical movement purposeful rather than reactionary.
So it's really about eliminating the involuntary static.
Precisely that. Think of a heavy pendulum versus a wind chime.
Okay, I like this analogy.
A wind chime reacts to every slight shift in the breeze, right? It's noisy, it's unpredictable.
Yeah, it's constantly moving.
But a heavy pendulum only moves when it is intentionally pushed. And when it moves, it carries weight and momentum.
Oh, that's such a great visual.
So when you employ charismatic stillness, you plant your feet to literally ground your center of gravity. You rest your hands calmly.
And you replace the rapid, appeasing head nods with a singular, deliberate nod. Right?
Yes, a slow nod that shows comprehension without subservience. You aren't acting like a statue. You are ensuring that when you do choose to move, that movement is an event.
Because it pulls the room's attention, since it isn't lost in a sea of background fidgeting.
Exactly.
That tracks perfectly with how we perceive authority figures in moments of crisis. The person panicking is moving frantically. The person in charge is incredibly still, processing the data.
It's the eye of the storm.
Okay, so if stillness is how they control space, the next technique addresses how they control time. The text introduces the charismatic pause.
This is one of my favorite concepts.
Now, standard public speaking courses always teach the tactical pause, right? Taking a breath at the end of a sentence so you don't speed read your presentation.
Right, just pacing yourself.
But the text treats the charismatic pause as a completely different mechanical tool.
The mechanical difference lies entirely in the placement of the silence.
Placement is everything here.
It really is. A tactical pause happens after a statement to let the speaker breathe or to let the information settle. A charismatic pause happens before the most critical piece of information.
So the speaker purposefully breaks the rhythm of their own sentence right before the climax of their thought.
Exactly.
Let's look at the psychological mechanics of why that works, because the text uses the phrase vacuum of anticipation.
It's a great phrase.
It is. And if we go back to literal physics, nature abhors a vacuum. When you suddenly introduce a void in the middle of a sentence, the audience's attention rushes in to fill that empty space.
And we can actually look at the neurobiology of this. The human brain is constantly functioning as a prediction machine.
Always trying to guess what happens next.
Right. When you are listening to someone speak, your brain is subconsciously predicting the end of their sentence.
And when a speaker suddenly stops right before the critical word or phrase,
it creates a prediction error in the brain. The dopamine system, which regulates curiosity and anticipation, just kicks into overdrive.
So the audience is suspended in a state of high neurological tension. They're wondering, what is the secret? What is the final variable?
Yes, it's like the drop on a roller coaster.
Oh, I love that analogy. The adrenaline doesn't peak when you hit the bottom of the hill. It peaks during that excruciatingly slow climb to the top.
And especially during that agonizing half second where the car is just hanging over the precipice.
Yes, the charismatic pause is engineering that half second of hanging over the edge.
What's fascinating here is that this is where most communicators fail.
Really? Why is that?
Because silence feels incredibly socially uncomfortable to the average person. Oh, for sure. We want to fill the dead air.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The amateur rushes past the precipice because they want to relieve their own internal tension. But the C2 level communicator is highly comfortable in that silence.
They live in that tension.
They do, and they use it to amplify the dopamine response in their audience. By the time they finally deliver the concluding phrase, the audience is so primed that the words land with exponentially more impact.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because once you have commanded the space through stillness, and you've suspended time through the pause, you have to direct all that accumulated attention somewhere.
You need a focal point.
Right, which brings us to the third physical technique, the deep gaze connection. And the text points out a massive flaw in how most professionals manage eye contact.
Oh, the standard corporate advice is terrible here. They always say to scan the room.
Yeah, make sure you look at everyone so no one feels left out.
But mechanically, this just results in the speaker's eyes darting from face to face like a searchlight.
It feels so impersonal. It is. They are looking at the audience as a collective mass, but they aren't actually seeing any individual. It is a performance of engagement.
And in a one-on-one setting, standard eye contact often devolves into just staring at the other person's pupils, which quickly feels aggressive or, superficial.
The deep gaze technique flips this entirely. The goal isn't to look at everyone. The goal is to make the person you are currently looking at feel like they are the only human being in the room.
And the framework offers very specific parameters for this, doesn't it?
It does. If you are speaking to a group, you do not move your eyes mid-sentence.
Wow, that takes discipline.
It does. You lock your gaze onto one individual and you hold it there for a full, complete thought.
So you anchor your entire physical presence to that one person until the sentence is finished.
Exactly. Only then do you move to someone else for the next complete thought.
If we look at the psychological impact of that, it is profound. In a highly distracted, multitasking world, receiving someone's undivided, unfragmented attention is just incredibly rare.
It's a gift, really. When a leader gives you a full sentence of unbroken eye contact, it triggers a release of oxytocin, which is the neurochemical associated with bonding and trust.
It strips away the feeling that the leader is delivering a monologue to a crowd and replaces it with the feeling of a private, intimate dialogue.
And the application for one-on-one interactions goes even deeper. The text suggests an internal visualization technique.
Right. Instead of just staring at the surface of their eyes, you imagine that you are looking gently through their eyes,
Attempting to understand the mechanics of their mind behind the pupils.
Now, I have to admit, that sounds slightly esoteric.
It does sound a bit out there, but the physical result is very real.
How so?
When you visualize looking through someone, the micromuscles around your eyes actually soften. Your pupils dilate slightly, which is a biological signal of high interest and empathy.
So you project profound recognition. People don't just feel heard, they feel fundamentally seen and understood.
Exactly.
This gives us our first actionable exercise for the listener, which the source material highly recommends.
Yes, the video audit. I highly encourage everyone to try this.
The assignment is to conduct a video audit of your own physical baseline. So set up your phone and film yourself speaking for 2 minutes about a current project.
Just speak normally for the first take.
Right. Then stop, reset, and do it again. But on the second take, consciously force these 3 physics parameters.
Ground your feet and eliminate all hand gestures unless they are expansive and deliberate.
Insert a 2-second pause before your main thesis statement. And finally, hold a deep, unwavering gaze with the camera lens for full sentences at a time.
The text suggests that when you review that footage, the delta in perceived authority between video 1 and video 2 will be staggering.
It is a highly revealing exercise, primarily because we are almost entirely blind to our own physical leakage.
We really are. We don't realize how much authority we are bleeding out through nervous movement or rush cadence until we are forced to observe it from the outside.
Okay, so we have built the physical container. We have dominated space with stillness, time with pauses, and focus with the deep gaze.
But presence without substance is just a theatrical performance.
Exactly. Attention is merely a spotlight. Once you have the audience's eyes, what do you actually put under that spotlight to bypass their skepticism and trigger an emotional desire to follow you?
This is where we transition.
Right. This requires a transition from the physical gravity of presence into the chemistry of emotional reaction. Let's look at the chemistry of storytelling.
The foundational premise of this section addresses a major fallacy in how we approach persuasion.
And the text states this so clearly. Logic makes people think, but emotion makes people act.
Yes. We have this persistent rationalist belief that if we just construct a strong enough spreadsheet.
Oh, the legendary spreadsheet.
Right. We think if we present enough undeniable data points, the audience will logically conclude that they must change their behavior.
But the data on human decision-making completely contradicts that, doesn't it? Logic justifies what emotion decides.
Exactly that. The prefrontal cortex, which handles data and logic, is excellent at analysis, but it is incredibly slow and energy intensive.
It doesn't drive immediate action.
No, it doesn't. The limbic system, particularly the amygdala, drives behavior based on survival, fear, and desire.
So if you want to create a chemical reaction that results in action, you cannot just transmit data.
You have to synthesize that data into a narrative. Storytelling is the mechanism that translates abstract data into emotional chemistry.
The source material provides a very specific narrative architecture for charismatic leadership, which it calls the future, present, past narrative.
It's a brilliant structure.
It really is. It structures any pitch, vision, or proposal as the three-act play. The sequencing here is what really fascinated me.
Act 1 is the future, which the text refers to as the promised land.
And starting with the future is highly strategic, isn't it?
Very much so. Before you ask people to do difficult work, you have to create the desire for the reward.
So Act 1 is pure aspiration. It's the what-if scenario.
You are painting a vivid, highly detailed picture of what success looks like.
And from a neurochemical standpoint, a compelling vision of the future triggers a release of dopamine.
Yes. The audience starts simulating that future in their minds, and they begin to actually crave it.
The text gives a fantastic example of a leader trying to implement a new HR retention protocol.
Oh, the HR example is perfect.
The standard logical pitch starts with the process, right? They usually say, we need to update our software and change our review cycles.
It's dry. It's totally uninspiring.
But the C2 level leader starts with the promised land. They say, imagine a culture where our absolute best talent never even considers looking at a recruiter's email.
Imagine a workplace where innovation isn't a siloed department, but the default setting of every team.
A future where we are the undisputed destination for the top minds in the industry. You hear that and your brain instantly says, I want to live in that reality.
You've successfully engineered desire, but, you can't linger in the future.
Why not?
Because a vision without friction is just a daydream. It lacks urgency.
Ah, that makes sense. Which requires the pivot to Act 2, the present. This is where you introduce the obstacle.
Right, because if the present is perfectly fine, there is zero biological motivation to expend the energy required for change.
In Act 2, the leader most ruthlessly and honestly articulate the current reality. They have to highlight the gap between the beautiful future they just painted and the painful reality of the status quo.
If Act 1 was about dopamine, Act 2 is about cortisol.
And cortisol is a stress hormone, right?
Yes. It creates tension and discomfort. You want the audience to feel the sharp edges of the current problem.
Following that same HR example, after painting the picture of being the ultimate talent destination, the leader drops the hammer.
They bring everyone back to earth.
Exactly. They say, but let's look at where we are today. We are bleeding talent. We are looking at a 20% annualized turnover rate.
Our internal processes have become so heavily bureaucratic that our brightest engineers are spending more time filling out compliance forms than building product.
The path to our future is entirely blocked by our current operational bloat.
The contrast is jarring, and it's meant to be.
The audience is now sitting in a state of high cognitive dissonance.
They desperately want the future, but they are acutely feeling the pain of the present.
They need a way out. They need a solution.
And this leads to the most sophisticated psychological maneuver in the framework. Act 3, the past.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because this is the part that completely subverted my expectations.
How so?
Well, if I'm outlining a proposal logically, my instinct is chronological, right? Past, present, future. Here is where we were. Here is the problem now. Here is where we are going.
That's how most people do it.
Or if I'm pitching a radical new disruptive idea, I might just focus on present and future. The present is broken. Let's build something completely new.
Right.
But the framework insists on ending with the past as the bridge. Why does the past hold the key to driving future action?
Because human beings are biologically terrified of the unknown.
We really are. Change is scary.
Change represents a massive risk to survival in evolutionary terms. Even if the future you painted in Act 1 is incredibly desirable, if you frame your solution as a leap off a cliff into uncharted territory, the audience's amygdala will trigger resistance.
So the fear of uncertainty will overpower the desire for the reward.
Exactly. The genius of using the past as the final act is that it neutralizes the fear of the unknown.
So it's an anchoring mechanism.
Yes. You do not present your proposal as a disruptive, terrifyingly new idea. You present it as a return to form.
You anchor the new initiative in the shared history and the foundational values of the group.
You reframe the change so that it doesn't feel like abandoning ship. It feels like a homecoming.
Let's see how that sounds in practice. The leader has tainted the future. They've highlighted the 20% turnover in the present.
Right. The tension is high.
Instead of saying, so we are throwing out the entire playbook and doing something unprecedented, they pivot to the past.
They say, this isn't the first time this company has faced a critical inflection point.
Think back to our founding days. We were a lean startup. We trusted our people. We moved with agility, and we despised bureaucracy.
The innovation initiative I am proposing today is not some radical experiment.
It is a bridge back to our original DNA. It is a return to the core values that made us great in the first place.
The emotional resonance of that phrasing is incredibly potent. A return to our original DNA.
It completely shifts the psychological paradigm for the audience, doesn't it?
It does. The change is no longer a threat to their identity. It is a reclamation of their identity.
The leader positions themselves not as a reckless disruptor, but as the protector of the tribe's legacy, guiding them safely into the future.
That is how you master the chemistry of storytelling.
This brings us to the second deep dive exercise for you, the listener. Think about an upcoming pitch, presentation, or even a difficult conversation where you need to persuade someone to change course.
Audit your current outline.
Right, if it is just a logical list of bullet points outlining the problem and the solution, I challenge you to restructure it using the future, present, past architecture.
Write out Act 1. Define the aspirational promised land.
Write out Act 2. Starkly define the painful present and the obstacle.
And then do the hard analytical work for Act 3. Find the historical anchor.
How can you frame your solution as a logical continuation of their past successes or core values? See what happens when you turn a data dump into an emotional narrative arc.
It requires a significant amount of preparation to seamlessly weave that narrative, but it is the difference between an audience passively agreeing with your data and an audience actively championing your cause.
Absolutely. So we have the physical presence, we have the emotional narrative, but a story is only as effective as the community it builds.
Which moves us into the final section of our analysis.
Exactly. How does this framework address the actual group dynamic of the people in the room? We're looking at the biology of a tribe.
To understand charisma at its highest level, we really have to view it through the lens of evolutionary psychology.
Because for hundreds of thousands of years on the savannah, human survival was entirely dependent on group cohesion.
An isolated human was a dead human.
Yeah, to belong to a tribe meant access to food, protection, and mates.
And the neurological software that kept our ancestors alive is still running in our brains today. We are constantly subconsciously evaluating our environment for social safety.
We are looking for our tribe, and we are looking for leaders who can guarantee the security and purpose of that tribe.
Charismatic leaders intuitively operate as master tribe builders.
And the source material identifies that these leaders build tribes not through sweeping declarations, but through very specific, subtle linguistic programming.
The first technique is the inclusive pronoun shift.
It sounds like a minor grammatical edit, but it fundamentally rewires the social dynamic of a room.
The research shows that C2 level communicators obsessively rely on the pronouns we, us, and our.
Conversely, they actively suppress the use of I and you.
If we connect this to the bigger picture and contrast this with traditional authoritative management, the difference is glaring.
A standard manager stands at the head of the table and says, I have developed a new strategy for Q3, and I need you to execute it by Friday.
Look at the structural boundaries that sentence creates. I at the top, you at the bottom.
It enforces a rigid, ego-driven hierarchy.
It signals to the room that the leader is the architect and everyone else is merely a tool for execution. It actively isolates the employees from the ownership of the project.
But the charismatic leader takes the exact same Q3 strategy and shifts the linguistics.
They say, we are facing a complex market shift this quarter.
We have developed a new strategy, and together we are going to execute this. This is our moment to prove our capability.
By simply shifting the pronouns, the rigid hierarchy dissolves. It is replaced by the psychology of a unified front.
The objective stops being about the leader's personal ambition, my strategy, and becomes a shared burden and a shared victory.
When an individual hears we, their brain's threat detection system powers down. Their biological need to belong is satisfied. They are safely inside the perimeter of the tribe.
Okay, I want to explore a potential limitation here, though.
Sure. What are you thinking?
Shifting pronouns to we is powerful, but it only works if we are actually doing something that feels meaningful, right?
That's a fair point.
If a manager says, we need to finish filing these quarterly compliance reports, the magic kind of dies, right?
Yeah.
Does the framework address how to maintain that tribal energy when the day-to-day reality of the work is inherently mundane?
That is exactly where the second biological technique comes into play, creating a noble cause.
Because a tribe cannot survive on belonging alone, it requires meaning.
Humans are meaning-making machines. If the work lacks meaning, the tribal cohesion fractures. The charismatic leader possesses the ability to reframe mundane metrics into moral imperatives.
Let's look at how the text demonstrates this reframing, because I found this fascinating. A standard manager focuses on the metric.
They might say, Our objective this year is to reduce supply chain costs by 6%.
It's accurate, but it's completely devoid of inspiration. No one is going to sacrifice their weekend to reduce supply chain costs by 6%.
Because a metric does not trigger the neurochemical reward system associated with purpose.
So what does the charismatic leader do with that 6%?
A charismatic leader takes that exact same 6% reduction and identifies the noble cause beneath it. They reframe it for the tribe.
They might say, the rest of this industry is comfortable passing their inefficiencies onto the customer. We refuse to do that.
Our mission is to build the most elegant, accessible supply chain in the world so that our product reaches people who need it when they need it without bloated costs.
We are the architects of a better system. You take a spreadsheet goal and you turn it into a crusade.
The employee is no longer just a supply chain analyst. They are a revolutionary fighting against industry complacency.
And that taps directly into the human desire for legacy. It provides a narrative of significance.
When a leader consistently frames daily tasks through the lens of a noble cause, they give the tribe the psychological endurance to push through the inevitable boredom and friction of the actual work.
So we have a tribe unified by the word we, and they are motivated by a noble cause. But history and sociology suggest that tribes rarely define themselves solely by what they are for.
They almost always define themselves by who they are fighting against.
Which brings us to the third technique, which the text explicitly warns is highly potent but requires delicate handling: identifying a common other.
The concept of in-group cohesion being accelerated by an out-group threat is a foundational principle of sociology.
When a group faces an external enemy, internal squabbles vanish. The group bonds tightly together to ensure survival.
Charismatic leaders understand this biological trigger and use it to rapidly accelerate team unity.
This is where I have a major question about the practical application of this framework, though.
I think I know where you're going with this.
If you are constantly manufacturing an enemy to keep your team motivated, whether that's a rival corporation or another department in your own company, or even a specific individual, doesn't that inherently breed a toxic, paranoid culture?
It absolutely can.
So how do you utilize the unifying power of an enemy without turning the workplace into a hostile environment?
That is the exact trap that novice leaders fall into. They create a tangible human enemy, which inevitably leads to toxicity and unethical behavior.
But the C2 level framework provides a bypass for this.
Right, brilliant bypass. The source material is adamant. The common other should never be a specific person, and ideally, not even a rival company. The most effective, sustainable enemy is an abstract concept.
An abstract concept. Let's look at the examples provided in the text. It is not us against them, it is us against mediocrity.
Or it is us against the outdated way of doing things.
It is us against complexity.
That is the genius of the abstraction. You hijack the biological benefits of the in-group, out-group dynamic, the deep bonding, the shared struggle, the heroic narrative, but you completely eliminate the toxic interpersonal fallout.
If we think about historical corporate examples, Steve Jobs was a master of this. When he returned to Apple, the enemy wasn't necessarily just Microsoft or IBM. The ultimate enemy he defined was complexity and ugly design.
Yes. Apple employees weren't just building computers. They were holy warriors fighting a crusade against the ugliness and complexity of the status quo.
Exactly. When your enemy is complexity, every time an engineer simplifies a line of code or a designer removes an unnecessary button, they aren't just completing a task.
They are striking a blow against the enemy. They are winning a battle for the tribe.
It unites the group philosophically rather than vindictively. You create a crusade without creating human casualties.
This gives us our final deep dive exercise.
Yes, I want you to audit the language you use with your team, your family, or your community. First, track your pronoun ratio. How often are you defaulting to I and you instead of we and us?
Force the shift and watch how the dynamic softens.
Second, look at the core project you are managing right now. What is the actual noble cause beneath the metrics? Write it down.
And finally, define your abstract enemy. What is the negative state of being that your team is united against?
Is it complacency? Is it inefficiency? Is it a lack of imagination? Give your tribe an abstract dragon to slay together.
By mastering the biology of the tribe, you fundamentally shift your leadership stance. You stop trying to push people forward from behind with structural authority, and you start leading them from within the center of a shared, meaningful identity.
So what does this all mean when we put it together? We have covered a massive architectural framework today.
We really have. We started by dismantling the myth of innate charm, defining charisma instead as a C2-level fluency in human behavior.
We explored the physics of presence, learning how to command a room's attention by utilizing the economy of motion to create stillness.
We talked about engineering the dopamine-driven vacuum of anticipation with the charismatic pause.
And generating profound intimacy through the unbroken, unfragmented deep gaze.
We then transitioned into the chemistry of storytelling, acknowledging that data informs, but only emotion compels action.
We broke down the future-present-past narrative architecture triggering desire by painting the promised land, introducing urgency by defining the painful present.
And critically, neutralizing the fear of change by using the past as an anchor to shared identity.
And finally, we unpacked the biology of a tribe. We looked at how dissolving hierarchy through inclusive pronouns satisfies the evolutionary need for belonging.
How reframing metrics into noble causes provides essential meaning.
And how uniting the group against an abstract enemy like mediocrity cements internal cohesion without breeding toxicity.
It is a comprehensive, scientifically grounded methodology for moving beyond the transactional nature of power and learning how to genuinely earn the gravitational pull of true leadership.
As we close this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over, which builds on the underlying mechanics we've discussed.
I think this is the most important takeaway of all.
When we started, I asked you to picture the most charismatic person you know. The tendency is to view that person as a sun, a massive source of energy projecting their light and power outward onto a passive audience.
That's the traditional view.
But if we look at the actual mechanics of the framework,
Yeah.
if the deep gaze is fundamentally about making the other person feel seen,
Right.
if the narrative bridge to the past is about making the audience feel safe in their identity, if the noble cause is about inviting them to be the heroes in their own story,
Then perhaps the ultimate secret of the Charisma Code is a complete inversion of how we think about power.
perhaps the most charismatic thing you can do isn't about projecting your power at all. It is about acting as a mirror.
A mirror that perfectly reflects the audience's own potential, their own importance, and their own capacity for greatness right back to them.
True charisma, it turns out, might have very little to do with how impressive you are. It might simply be the mastery of how you make everyone else in the room feel about themselves.
That is a brilliant synthesis. The amateur leader demands that the room look at how great they are. The charismatic leader ensures the room sees how great they can be together.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take these mechanics, the physics, the chemistry, the biology, and apply them. Go out and don't just communicate. Connect, inspire, and lead. Until next time.